just scheduled a special meeting for Tuesday night, a week from Tuesday. I think so. The parent letter? I'll pull it up. All right, can everybody hear me okay? All right, I'm going to do this a little different here. I've got a Zoom meeting set up on the laptop just for purposes of recording this because I wasn't sure if anybody wasn't going to be able to make it today. At least we'd have a shot at having a playback that somebody could at least listen to the dialogue and wouldn't have to spend a bunch of time repeating ourselves, and I certainly don't want anybody to miss anything. So that's what's going to be going on back here. I'm going to have to check on that every once in a while just to make sure it's recording. But most importantly, Matt's got a redundant backup in the back room here that we've been using for school board meetings on the live stream here. So hopefully we get this recorded in a way that's going to be useful. So welcome back, everybody. I never in a million years would have thought we'd be standing here having a driver meeting in July or ever have a need for it, but I also never thought we'd be ending school the way we did last year and never got to properly say thank you for last year and have a nice summer and all those wonderful things. It's just crazy, crazy stuff. And I'm glad to see all of you. I haven't heard of anybody that's had any real run-ins with COVID or anything. Maybe you know somebody that has, but what crazy times we're living in, and certainly very unprecedented and very scary for all of us. But we do have to move forward, and we do have to plan for school reopening. So that's really what I wanted to get everybody together back together here for. Talk about some things that have evolved since March. You know, we spent a great deal of time, first and foremost, trying to figure out what are we going to do to finish that school year. And so administratively, getting kids set up for online learning and all those things, that was the priority. And then, of course, some of you volunteered to work with the grab-and-go meals this summer, and other drivers did some other things, helping us shuttle some buses in for repair, and I think somebody volunteered to help the kids or help Brett Johnson finish the student house. So I appreciate everybody that stepped in and helped out with those things. We got through it all, and so now here we are talking about the new school year. And we've spent a great deal of time, Tony and Lori and Tim and myself, probably since about April, getting together weekly for kind of a status meeting and, okay, what scenarios do we even need to talk about? What scenarios do we need to look at? What what could anything look like this fall? And we've spent a great deal of time, gotten to know each other quite well, I would say, over this time period, but kicked the tires on a lot of things, and I think we've come up with a good plan that makes sense, and it's going to be fluid enough for us to adapt based on the changing school schedule if there is one. So we'll get into that here in a little bit. But I think the first order of business that I want to start with is the things that we left unfinished last year, and that is, we had a couple drivers that were just getting licensed and getting going at that time, and we had the meeting on, I think it was like March 4th, and it seems like forever ago, and Ben was introduced at that time. Is Ben here today? Okay, well, Ben Brunick is a new driver for us, and he had just finished up at that point. I'm not even sure he got a chance to drive on his own. He was doing some ride-alongs, maybe a handful of days before we closed. So Ben Brunick, is Jane here today? Jane Woosterwald? No? So she is a paraprofessional at the high school, and we had a need last spring before COVID to transport a student to Sioux Falls every day based on that student's needs, and James was going to do that for us, so Jane was going to step in and drive 303 because he didn't have to have the full CDL, and we were getting her groomed, and I think many of you probably met her in the driver's lounge. So we're working with her to get her licensed right now as another option, but she still remains as a paraprofessional first and foremost. A couple other new drivers then. Steve Schmidt. Is Steve here today? Steve, welcome. So just finishing up licensing. I know we were really close in the spring, and of course everything kind of came to a screeching halt. Then luckily, sometimes just have a little good luck. We had 5 new drivers apply over the summer months, and I'd like to just welcome all of you for various reasons that you've moved to Yankton and interested in driving, whether that's part-time or eventually if a route opens up. Just happy to have more people and willing to do this. This is really, really great to have a lot of options here. So Linda Pauling moved here from Minnesota, right? Got that right. Keith Rick is over here, moved here. Now you guys came together, right? No, did not come together. So also Jeannie Brendan came from Arizona. Okay. Jerry Fox moved here from Pierre, been driving with the Pierre schools. And Bo Riley, the newest of the applications. In fact, I just got the email that you got it submitted, so thank you for that. So this is great. I'm really excited to have so many more new drivers here, and I wish I could stand here and give you a definitive, this is what the fall is going to look like, or winter, but I can't. I'd be lying to you if I said that I could do that. But we're going to go through all those reopening plans and how it affects bus drivers and all the things that we're talking about right now. Next item here, I talked a little bit about this in March, and we were working through I don't want to call it a reorganization, but kind of getting more structure into our transportation function. And so I've been working behind the scenes for quite some time, and we finally got it pulled together and got the school board authority to move. So Tim now has an official title. I've hired him to be the transportation coordinator. So what that does then, Tony's job remains supervisor of busing and mechanic. He is still in charge of everything that he's been in charge of. But my belief over the last couple of years, and I'm going to repeat a little bit of what I told you in March, my belief is there are so many more things that we can be doing in transportation, mainly on the costing and tracking information and having that first point of contact to be all things transportation. When an administrator needs something, or the building or the superintendent needs something, or parents need something, I want to have everything come to one person who is kind of the person that handles that stuff or coordinates that stuff, and also planning routes and all of the other things that would naturally go with a coordinator position. So Tim has assumed those duties as of July 1st, and we're going to work still with Tony and Tim and myself and clearly define those roles. So I just need everybody to be patient during this, because I don't have all of the details ironed out yet, but we have a concept of what we're going to need to do and who's going to be the go-to on scheduling and that kind of stuff. And as luck would have it, for better or worse, having that in place, Tony, as you know, had some back surgery and has been laid up here for a little bit. So I'm really glad we took that plunge and got this rolling, because I'll be honest with you, I'd be absolutely in a pickle if I didn't have Tim out here helping plan all this stuff. So he's also doing some work for me directly too as kind of a project manager, specifically on COVID planning for facilities, and doing some work now trying to find hand sanitizing stations that are portable for the grade schools and also for the grounds. Working through, found us some new gadgets for cleaning and sanitizing buses, and just doing a ton of research stuff that I just frankly don't have time to. It's just overwhelming right now trying to get all that stuff figured out. So anyway, I just want to clarify now, Tim is fully on board with the coordinator position, and Tony remains supervisor and mechanic, and we'll get into more detail on that here as we get into the school year. Then another announcement or introduction, she's not here today, but I have a new secretary. Jennifer Donner will be starting Thursday of this week. So she won't probably initially have a big role in transportation. Lori is going to be the office point person on all things busing for now. I've got some other plans for Jennifer, and specifically we're in the midst of hiring a supervisor of building and grounds. So I've got a real focus right now on making sure that our schools are ready for kids in about a month, and Jennifer's going to have a hand in that as well. So Lori is going to be our point person, not just for special ed, but regular busing and working through. Jennifer, I shouldn't say she won't have a role, because she will, but it's going to probably be a secondary type of role, and working with discipline reports and maybe some stop arm violations and those kinds of things, those reports that we're doing. But anyway, so you're going to see a new face in there, and I'll have her at the next driver in service and introduce her so everybody knows who she is, if you don't stop in beforehand and meet her. But she'll start on Thursday of this week. So I think that's all the introductions. That's a lot of new people. Thing that we didn't get to do last spring, and that's the Time Recognition Award. So I want to make sure that we cover that now and recognize everybody that has a service award. So I'm not sure how to do this with COVID. I don't want to get too close or invade anybody's private space here, but we had some drivers reach some milestones that we didn't get a chance to recognize when that was canceled. So typically we go after 1 year, 5 years, 10 years. So we've got one driver hit 10 years. Denny Sunleaf has been driving with the school for 10 years this year, so congratulations. I do have a framed certificate for you. You want to just hand that to him? So congratulations, Denny. I hope you're able to drive for us when your shoulder heals up going forward. Then we had another driver this year, or last year I should say, reach 20 years, and that is Kim Slamp. So we have a gift for Kim. Then 25. Any guesses? Ken Wibben, 25 years. Make sure I get the right one here. Okay, 35 years. Any guesses? Got to be getting close. Jeannie Mock, congratulations. 35 years through last school year. This one. There's still one more. The next increment, 40 years. Barb Fisher. Congratulations. 40 years driving. I so wish we could have recognized you in front of the whole staff, because that's really impressive. That is a lifetime dedicated to transportation and hauling kids, and thank you. Thank you all for your time with the schools. Very much appreciated. So hopefully next year we're back on track and doing a more consolidated thing, but I just don't know if we're going to be able to do that. So this might be the norm for a while, where we do it in small groups. But nonetheless, it's important that we recognize. So again, congratulations. So, the next thing that we wanted to go through, and this is I'm going to do a little bit of a hybrid here. Some things we do at our normal back-to-school meeting, where we're reviewing contact information and making sure that we've got everything up to date. We're going to do that, and we're also going to talk a little bit about driver assignments. And one of the things that I asked Tim to do early on this summer was to reach out to all of you and kind of gauge your level of what's the right word I'm looking for here? I don't want to say commitment to the schools, because that's not the question. It's, given the circumstances, where are we at with your willingness to drive in such uncertainty. Everybody who had a regular route was contacted. Did those in, but I said, well, first we better figure out who's even willing to drive before we can go to Dr. Kindle and say, here's our plan for transportation. If I don't have enough people to drive the buses, that kind of changes the plan a little bit, I would think. So we went, had Tim make the phone calls. I think Tony may have made some of the calls, looked at the list and said, okay, great. We know we can offer busing. I don't know what that looks like yet, but we know we've got drivers that are willing to do it. So then the next step in going through all of this, I've been looking for cost-cutting measures pre-COVID. I'm always looking for that, and those of you that have been driving for a long time, you know, over the years we've reduced the number of routes where we can or made changes where we can. And given the technology that we've got on the bus now, we can track and figure out, more efficient ways of doing things. It's not all about efficiency, by the way. I am not going to cut student safety, put that ahead of saving a buck. I'm also not going to there's just some good common sense things, and we want to make sure that we're here for our parents. Our policy remains, anybody that lives out of city limits is going to be eligible for bus service. Even with COVID, we're still going to offer the same level of service for next year. So as we go forward, I had Tim looking and analyzing last year and tracking data. We are going to consolidate a route. We think it's the right time, and given the circumstances, I don't know how many kids we're going to transport this fall, but I assignments, and I think everybody's been contacted, so there's not going to be any surprises to this. And as we get into the school year, what I wasn't completely sure about is if we're going to have a need to do double runs or even potentially triple runs, or if we're going to end up having to, have half days of school where we're bringing a load of kids in and taking a different load of kids home, but then how do you do that with cleaning buses? And so I thought, man, we could need double the drivers as far as I know right now. I just don't know. So having additional people apply, I'm like, okay, this gives us some flexibility. And that coupled with planning the routes and where we're at, right now, some of the newer drivers, it may be a little bit slow in the beginning for us to get you guys going as far as having work, but I'll ask for your patience on that because I think that gives us an opportunity to make sure that you're comfortable operating. Many of you have driven buses in other schools, so that's not going to be hard. But just getting to know Yankton, getting to know how we do things here, getting familiar with our tablets and the scan system so that we have an opportunity to do more ride-along planning than we maybe have in the past. So I think that gives us, where there's a little bit of a surplus, I'll call it, gives us an opportunity now to make sure that people are properly trained. And that's always been something that I've felt rushed, that when we bring somebody in, and it's always out of desperation and not always able to give people the full training that they deserve. Tony spends a ton of time with people getting them licensed and along the way talking about what we do, but I never really felt good personally about, okay, you're licensed, now what? That next gear of training and showing people the ropes, I think, is an area that I'd really like for Tim to focus on, and doing more riding and planning. And for those of you now that haven't driven since March, there's maybe a refresh period here where we need to go back through the tablets and how to use those again, and just make sure that we're all on solid ground as we plan for the new school year. And I didn't know it at the time. I had different reasons for putting that scan system in, namely safety, but that is going to be an incredible tool for us should we have kids this fall that we need to do contact tracing. And I didn't think about it at the time, but having kids, knowing who got on the bus, when they got on the bus, that's all very relevant now with COVID prepping and making sure that, so it's more important than ever that we've got accurate scans on the school buses this fall. So I'm really glad we did that, and we've been through this for the last several years, and I've stood in front of you and said, it's coming, and without Tim, it never would have got here because I didn't know what to do with it, and I don't have time to work on that only. So Tim got it up and going, and Lori's been very helpful supporting all those functions. So it is working, it's working well, and I think he's pushed Synovia to the brink of reevaluating their development and some of the things that they're telling him a check's in the mail for all of his time. Have you got anything yet? No. Well, I wouldn't hold your breath, but it's working well, and I just want to make sure that as we start the new school year, that we go into it with the right attitude, because not only from a safety and knowing where kids are at, but tracking the kids on the bus, and I mean, it's going to happen. I'd be a fool to stand here and tell you that we're not going to have kids that get sick, because it's going to happen. It's just a question of how do we control it, how do we respond, and what do we do about it. So we're going to do everything we can this fall to protect you as drivers and to protect the kids. And we're going to have some safeguards in place that if kids have symptoms and all the things you've read about, you know, if you're sick, you're not supposed to get on the bus. But we all know, and maybe guilty as charged, as parents, give them a little Tylenol in the morning or ibuprofen if they've got a fever and ship them off to school. I sure hope people don't do that now. I just don't know what that's going to look like. But the reality is that's kind of the way it goes. And so if we get kids on the bus that are displaying symptoms, we have to be very diligent on the school buses to not expose ourselves, not expose you to additional risk. So we'll go through some of those safety things that we want to talk about and hear from you guys. You know, we've had some meetings the last couple of weeks with the community and heard a lot about classroom safety, heard a lot about teachers and their concerns as we begin to reopen school. You know, what are we going to do to protect teachers? I don't have all the answers. Dr. Kendall does not have all the answers. You know, we're totally reading recommendations, participating in meetings with other schools, other superintendents. My colleagues, school business managers don't host meetings because very few actually have an involvement in transportation. But Tim has been joined, and Lori sat in on several transportation meetings from people like directors across the country, and different. Synovia has hosted a platform of meetings, and TransFinder, who is our routing software, has had a bunch of different webinars and different people sharing their insights about how to reopen safely and just best practices. So a lot of that has gone into this thought and planning process, and along with South Dakota Department of Health and CDC, talking about, you know, what's right or wrong. And unfortunately, when the CDC came out with their recommendations, they did not back away from, or contemplate, I should say, 6 feet of social distancing on a bus. Well, you can imagine what that looks like for capacity. It takes your capacity down to maybe a dozen kids if you're trying to keep them all 6 feet apart. It's just not practical. So where we talk about making sure we follow the CDC recommendations, we're trying to do that for most things, but distancing is a tough one. And I think all the schools, anybody that you talk to would acknowledge that is a tough deal. So I'm going to come back to that here in a little more. But let's go back to driver assignments, because that's kind of what I was trying to set up for here. So I'll bring this up on the screen and what we're thinking, and if I can get there. Yep, I got new contacts, so I'm struggling a little bit here with this one, Tim, the roster document. All right, so this is our working document, but I think you'll get the gist of it here real fast. So this year we've taken what is Route Z, and that is no longer a dedicated route. So we'll start at the top with C. We've assigned for Kim to drive C in the morning. Connie stays on C in the PM. And then Dale driving D, AM and PM. Ray driving E. Daryl, Ken, no changes. Mark would slide over to K. Dean would be KPM. John then would move into the in-town route. Jeannie and Dave, no changes. Jack would go to Q. Scott would start the way he finished last year, doing R. And then Jordan and James and Barb, no changes. And as we know, Julie moved, so we've asked Mary to step in and drive 404 for Julie for this coming year. So that's the lineup that we have, that we're planning with. And then I have everybody else that's licensed or pending, or we just have a tracking document here and have all the names of people that maybe only drive activities or drive as subs or are pending in licensing. And those of you that just applied, we maybe haven't got it all the way up to date if you've got all of your stuff in. So we'll get to that point. But This is our working document as we plan and kind of fill the spots for who's going to be driving. And then as we move into the year, I'll talk a little bit about our methodology here with planning these routes. When Dr. Kindle and I sat down and talked about what is transportation going to look like this fall, I said, we've talked internally about, well, if we really need decisions from the administration first about what's school going to look like before we can figure out, can we transport? And how many kids would that be, and who's going to ride, who's not going to ride? You can sit here all day long and do the what if stuff, but had school plans been designed to stagger start times or even alternating half day, the need for busing becomes exponentially larger, and then trying to figure out how you're going to sanitize and get ready. And I said, I don't think I want to plan for a bunch of what ifs, because if we do move to a different schedule, it totally disrupts the parents' schedules and their times and our route planning, and then we're starting over and we're just chasing it all year long. And sometimes maybe families can't make those changes quickly enough. So I said, what if we just planned our routes based on what we've done in the past? And in the past, if your bus had 40 kids that rode every day, due to all of that's going on, maybe now there's 15, we still run that route. And instead of trying to go out and, okay, well, now we've got 15, we can put a bunch more kids on here and change everything up, I don't think that's a good idea, because as the pandemic wears on, I have a personal philosophy that it might be interesting to see what it looks like on November 5th, the day after the election, but it could look different, or maybe there's a vaccine that comes out and maybe things look different after the new year or something. I just don't want to change up all these routes again and then we end up starting over. In families, it's very disruptive if you have a schedule and have jobs and all of that stuff to work around. So we're going to run these bus routes as what I'm going to call normal as possible, and we're going to have to figure out in the next several weeks who's going to actually be riding. So I've been here, this is my 13th year starting, and we've always started with the assumption that, well, they're a bus family, they ride every year, they've still got kids that are of age, so they're going to be on the route. We just put them on the route, and based on the fact that they've been riding forever. There's other families that sign up, literally the Friday before Monday school starts. Oh, school starts on Monday? Maybe I ought to sign up for school and try and get a bus ride. So we see all of it. This year, we're going to start with everybody has to sign up for bus service. We're starting the database from zero. And with that, families that are going to ride are going to be asked to sign a waiver. The approach with our waiver here is, we all know that coming to school is not an option. It is a mandatory thing. It's the law. You have to send your children to school. Riding the bus is not a law. That is a service provided by the school. So we're going to approach it as, we're going to ask families to sign a waiver, and we're happy to provide the service, but you have to acknowledge that your child may get sick, they may be diagnosed with COVID, and we can't be responsible for that. So I'm calling it more of an acknowledgement of the risk, but the legal term is it's a waiver. Now, I haven't heard a lot of feedback yet. The letters to that just went out last week. You guys maybe know people that ride or had somebody call and go, what the hell is this? I just want you to have that background to know nothing is the same in this regard, and I'm not looking to stick anybody or say, well, you signed the waiver, but if somebody does get sick and they come back and they sue us, that's kind of the world we live in. We have to acknowledge that there is the potential that your child could get sick on the school bus. So also in that letter then, we've provided some different, a summary of the steps that we are taking to keep kids safe. And I gotta get to that. I copied it to the desktop here. Cheated. So I was just thinking, how about I read that? 21 transportation. Safety is our priority, and we are to reduce the spread of COVID-19 on the buses. Rules concerning riding will be strictly enforced. So the bullets that we list out here, and we've tried to consolidate this to keep it to a page, and I'm even worried that this is a lot for people to actually read through. But one of the key takeaways here is we've really gotten lax over the years with our bus rules. You know, kids jumping the seats and kids touching each other and being kids. That's not going to be an option this year. And we're going to do everything we can, and this is something that I'm going to need your help with. That needs to be a discipline referral because the parents have now been advised that the rules are going to be strictly enforced. If your child is told to stay in their seat, keep their hands to themselves, and they don't do it, they're going to be referred to the building principal and quite likely removed from the bus. The old days of strike 1, strike 2, strike 10 are gone. Okay, this is not something we're going to mess around with. It's going to be a very little tolerance of kids that. And I think a lot of those kids are probably going to have a little bit of a rude awakening, but once they get into school and they realize how much things have changed, I'm hoping, and we're hoping administratively, that they're going to be darn happy to be back in school with their friends, that they're going to come around pretty quickly. So I'm not looking to get out there and just remove everybody from the bus. So problem solved. We don't have any kids that ride. But at the same time, this is serious, and we're going to take it seriously. So some of the steps that we're going to do, we're going to be working with disinfecting prior to each trip using an electrostatic fog sprayer, and we'll show you how this thing works, and making sure that we get disinfectant applied to all the school bus surfaces. Drivers will wear masks, and students are highly encouraged to wear masks. If you paid attention to the school board meetings last week, there is an open dialogue right now about whether or not to mandate masks on all school property. If I were a betting man, right now, today, it's going to be optional, but the winds of change are blowing, and that train has left the station. I would be willing to bet we're going to be mandatory masks to open school. So that being said, I have to clarify some things with Dr. Kendall and the board that wearing a mask on the school bus, that's school property. You know, you could very conveniently say school property is school property, everybody wears a mask. I just don't know how to enforce that because what's going to happen, and you all know this, you're going to pull up to a stop, have a mask. So we're going to have to be prepared to either allow them to ride first day and say, kid, tomorrow you got to have a mask or you can't ride. Well, are we past it? We just keep, we're assuming we're going to be handing out masks to kids, and we're assuming that they won't bring them on day 2 and day 3 and day 4. So we just don't know what that's going to look like. We don't know what the penalties are going to be or how strict. I think as drivers we're going to have to be very flexible with it and just know I don't think we're going to leave kids at the bus stop because they didn't bring a mask, because it's such a political issue and it's such a contentious thing for some people that hardly feels right to me, but I don't make those choices, and so we're going to have to do the best we can with it. I think, though, going into the year, will be didn't have it yesterday. Okay, you've been told. You got to have a mask to wear the bus or to ride the bus. And I don't have answers for if there'll be a day 3, a day 4. I don't know at this point. Go ahead, Ken. Well, that to me, that's an easy one. If you've got the mask, you wear it. If it's mandated. Now, I need to be very careful that we don't leave here and get ahead of the policy, because the policy is still open for dialogue and input. I'm telling you my personal opinion about where I think it's going to end up, so that you're not surprised when you read it in the paper the next day. Oh, well, they went ahead and did that. He just said last week that they're optional. It is very, very fluid. Well, as bus drivers, I'm just gonna put it right out there and ask you to wear a mask for your safety.
Well, what he's talking about, it's discipline report. Kids, you look back, if they haven't got a mask on, you tell them put it on. You know, if he does that a couple more times, it's discipline. Same as touching another kid
Yep. And I've talked many times. We've had work groups formed through the summer. I don't know, we've probably had at least a half a dozen administrator meetings and different conversations where, we're brainstorming different things from different areas of operations. And I've told the administrators each time it was my turn to give a report, all the steps that we've identified that we'll continue to go through here, but mandating drivers having the mask on the bus and then students highly encouraged. We've all got the same concerns about how do you enforce, and they've got the same things in the buildings, but we'll work through that. I just don't know what to tell you. We'll have another driver in service on August 17th, and then I'll know for sure what the policy is going to be and some strategies for how we're going to enforce that. We don't have face shields on here, but it might be a situation too where as drivers, we've been identifying different PPE to purchase, and Tim has a sample of a mask purchased down here. We've got a lot of different options for masks and a lot of different options or a couple of options for shields that, drivers, if you want to wear a shield on top of it, we bought now the style that you can flip up and down. Not that one, but it's actually there is a style on order that you can flip. If your comfort level is such that you want to wear a shield when the kids are boarding the bus and then flip it up when you're driving, we want to make sure we give you options. I'm a little hesitant to make you wear a shield only because I don't know how I don't want to affect your vision, especially when it gets in the winter months here and you're driving your routes in the dark. I just don't know how that's going to work. But to start the school year, you can experiment with some of these things and find your own comfort level. And, we're going to continue to talk about different things that we can do to keep you safe. But let me finish the letter, and then I'll circle back and we'll get through a couple more questions here. But some of the obvious things we're going to do, and we're telling parents, we're going to provide sanitizer on the bus and disinfect all of our buses. And here's some of the things procedurally then that we're going to get into. Seating students one to a seat, except if you know that they are in the same family. Then seat them together. And it might be a situation where as we tweak this and get further into school, we might have to go to assigned seating. Because again, that might come back on contact tracing, knowing who they sat by on any given day. And so that's some of the strategies that are now coming out from other schools, and other Department of Health just came out with that recommendation on activity buses to use assigned seating as a strategy to help minimize the risk. So we aren't telling that to parents at this point in time, but that might be a strategy we put into play come August if that's where the directions are going. So the other thing is filling from the back to the front, trying to minimize kids that are crossing, touching each other as they go by, slapping a kid on the head, all the things that kids do. We would just naturally, in the mornings, load from the back to the front, and they're going to come and pass each other when you go to the schools. I get that. But the less amount of time that they're passing each other, it helps. And in the school buildings then, there are lots of different directional things like that they're going to be doing to try to minimize students rotating around and passing each other and touching each other and those kinds of things. So just a sampling of some of the things that we're talking about publicly. There may be more things that we do. Some of the things Tim has been looking at and we're going to try and get on some of the buses to try is a vinyl curtain that would hang behind your seat, somehow be just like magnets or grommets or something to just give another shield of protection from the kids that are sitting in the front coughing and the germs. They're saying that COVID is spread primarily through airborne now. Just another way to protect the driver. And they're clear vinyl, by the way, so I'm not sure. We kind of want to try that on a bus or two and get the drivers react to it, because it looking through a window there. So I'm not sure if that's good or bad, but those are some of the strategies that other schools across the country are trying out. Some are going as far as putting curtains between each seat, and they're actually making little cubes out of the bus, like an ice cube tray. You just put all the kids in and then they come out. That's a really expensive solution that we just weren't sure was going to be overly effective at this point in time. So there's some things we've shared with parents. And then I talked a little bit about this, but asking all the parents to sign up, whether this particular letter is addressed to the out-of-town families. We have a separate letter that we've addressed to in-town families, and asking them to do so by August 10th. And that date, we'll take sign-ups after August 10th, but I'm not going to promise anybody that they're going to be routed by the first day of school, because I want a good chance to look at how many kids are scheduled to be on a bus. You know, do we have any concerns there about overloading? You know, what we used to do in terms of capacity might not work in terms of COVID going forward. So there's going to be some tweaking there. And so we're going to lock it down on August 10th, and families have been advised of that. And those that don't respond by, you know, probably starting the end of July, staff in my office will start calling, going, you know, hey, school is scheduled to start, and, you know, what's your status with the bus? Well, I'm not signing no damn waiver. We're not making you do anything. If you don't want your kids to ride, that's just fine. We'll remove you from the bus and, you know, go about your business. That's just fine. So, yeah, Ray, did you have something? Only the fact that they are specifying the steps and placed on a route versus indicating which stop they're going to be at, just to be clear about, so it doesn't confuse people. You know, because in town you're signing up for a group stop. Out of town you're door to door. Correct. So let's get into that a little bit. The way that you're going to know, okay, that particular that okay, yep. So yeah, if the kid shows up, here's how we're going to address the waivers and how you're going to know. Bus passes in the past have been white, right? They've been on white stock, but the thing about the pass is you can have last year's pass and it still reads. And we've told kids, hey, you don't have to get a new pass if you just use last year's or use your phone or all of those kinds of things. So that will work certainly to scan, but if you're the driver and you're looking and watching kids load, this year they're going to have a red pass. And so if you see kids trying to load with a white pass, then you're going to need to let them know, hey, where's your red pass? Well, I don't know. I got this from the school. No, you didn't. Not this year you didn't. You may have gotten it last year, but this is the red pass that tells you that the waiver's on file. So the question's going to come up then, what do you do when they don't have the red pass? Well, you're going to give them a ride that day. Maybe if you can, seat them off by themselves. You know, maybe in the front, save the first 3 rows or something to those kids that don't have passes. That's where you sit today, but you need to get signed up. Your parents need to get a hold of the business office, get signed up, get the waiver. We'll get these printed up as quickly as we can and into their hands. I don't have a better way of doing this, you know, and I don't want to make it complicated for you guys because you've got a lot of responsibility as it is, let alone trying to sift through who's got a waiver, who doesn't have a waiver. We thought this would be a quick way for you to identify that. Well, the phone will still work. Yeah, but not for an identification. Yeah, so I think as you get to know your kids, you know, you'll be able to know, yeah, I know you've got to go, you know, and use. Yeah, if they show you this one time, you know, and we just haven't got into it far enough yet to know. We could give you a daily update if we really wanted to, but then you're rifling through pages of paper, and if they show up on your tablet, one of the things we've talked about is we're not going to place them on the route. So you know, they're not going to be in your drop down as kids at that assigned to that stop. So then you're going to be, well, I know there's more at this stop, and maybe it's a group stop, just 8 kids, and you know 6 kids are actually showing. Well, you know 2 of them aren't signed up. Well, they would show up as what's called an unknown rider.
Yeah, they'll show up as unknown. I mean, the same thing's gonna happen to you. If they aren't on the list, they don't have a waiver on file, they're gonna come up as unknown rider the minute they scan. And of course, if they're on the phone, you won't be able to know, but if they don't have the red card, that'll be your first clue. But you see an unknown rider, it'll be just like last year, you'll question them, allow the rider to board, and then we'll use that list to determine that.
Yeah, what we've done in the past, and that's a good question, is what's worked well for us in the past, rather than sending them out in advance of school, because then they get them in the mail and they don't bring them the first day, and well, I never got mine. Well, yeah, you did, but your parents didn't give it to you, or you didn't make it a priority. So we've been printing them up and giving them to drivers the first day of school. So that first morning, they're not going to have the red pass. You're going to have a stack of cards, and probably not so much yourself because you're not assigned to a route at this point. But the regular route drivers will then, they know the drill and passing them out, and in the afternoon, where's your pass? You got to kind of train the kids, because that's, especially now, they haven't had to have their pass since March. It's like, okay, nothing's new here. This is, you did this all of last year if they rode. But it's going to be a little bit of a retraining period, so I would fully expect the first week is going to be difficult to truly enforce and bust kids' chops for not having the right pass. But I'm hopeful that parents are going to be very diligent, given the situation, making sure that they're educating their kids to be, hey, this is a different time. We can't be screwing around with this. And when they get that first phone call from either me, Tim, a principal, we're not going to be tolerating, there's no games. It's you either sign the pass or you're not riding. It's that simple. They will scan, they will work, and I think it is important that they still scan, even if they don't have the right card, still scan them on the bus. Because we want to know who's riding, we want to know, we get 3 days into school and there's all of a sudden a confirmed case and it's traced back to bus J. Well, I want to know who's on that bus. I'm going to be asked by Dr. Kendall and Kathy Wagner, I want a report of who rode that bus that morning. And if we're not enforcing the scanning, that's going to be really difficult to do. So that, well, I mean, the bus accident was the whole reason we wanted. Yeah, the whole reason we did this was from an emergency readiness standpoint, but now there's a whole new dimension to it on the contact tracing and making sure that we know who's on your buses and whatnot. So we'll talk more on August 17th about strategies to plan you'll see your route a little better of who actually is going to ride. You may get your list and go, where's half of my kids? Well, I think that tells you that their parents aren't comfortable putting them on a bus. So or they forgot. And at that point in time, they will have had at least probably 2 phone calls from my office, a letter and 2 phone calls. And that first morning when we don't show up to pick them up, and they're hot and they're calling the business office and chewing ass, sorry, you got to pay attention to what's going on. I'm not your babysitter. So it's just a different time and a different mentality, and no time for games, and we're not going to put kids at risk. So, but I want you to know that you are going to be supported in this, and this is not something that we're going to take lightly. I'm just not going to play games with parents that, well, I'm not a masker, and by God, you're not going to infringe on my rights, then take your kids to school. It's simple. No, you can. Do it gently. Well, welcome to South Dakota, Linda. Yeah, we have a zero tolerance of parents do not get on the bus, and we're not going to tolerate that. And as a driver, you just simply tell them, look, if you've got a concern, you call the office. I've got to run my route. This is not something we're going to talk right here with the kid in front of the kids. I mean, yeah, I don't. It's just you're going to have to just manage the situation best you can and try not to run them over or knock them over with your bus. But so there's going to be more to come on this. We're working through it, but that's the logic that we're putting into place right now is getting waivers, having people sign up, issuing them a new color-coded pass, and we'll see what we're dealing with here in the next couple of weeks and what we're getting for numbers and how that all looks. But my message to you is we're not going to alter the routes based on those numbers. If you've got 10 kids that sign up for your bus, that's how we're going to start the year. Because I think it's going to evolve where once people get over that fear of, oh my gosh, you know, we're not going to have an instant outbreak the moment all these kids go back to school. I hope we don't, but I mean, we have to be realistic about it. I think we're going to start to see the bus pick up as we go, you know, more and more riding. And
Yep, they're good.
the only downside of a red card is I don't know, and Tim, you know, suggested, or I asked, do you ever read their name? Because when it's dark out, you're not going to read these very easily. But
Well, we can't do white, unfortunately, but that being said, I might try light blue or something like that.
yeah,
Just
it may not be red. If we get all the way down to it, it may be a different color, but just know it'll be color coded somehow, some way. Well, we've tried that, but they don't print real well. Nothing's easy, Ken. I'm just telling you, nothing's easy. So questions on that. That's a big part of why I wanted to get together, because you know your families, and they may call you and go, what the hell, who's this Jason Beats, and why is he sending me a letter? And we're trying to do the right thing. So if they don't, you know, bottom line is it's service. And if you're not comfortable, we're not going to make you do anything you're not comfortable with. And there's going to be families that aren't going to send their kids to school. They're going to keep them home and do the virtual thing until whatever that time is.
Once you get into school and they finally will get it in their head, yeah, I want to get that kid to school, can they then sign up at
Mhm.
later and then get them on the bus and get them back on?
I'm going to call it the dead period from August 10th to the 24th. I'm not going to go out of our way to slam people onto a bus route because they didn't plan ahead. So quite likely that we'll start school first 2-3 days. We'll get them on, but we're not going to. Last year, maybe it was 2 years ago, you know, when the years when we don't have a pandemic, in Riverboat Days, we have people literally show up on Friday of Riverboat Days, register for school, and realize that school starts on Monday, and then they want bus service, and they live out in Timbuktu, and you're supposed to find them. And by God, we're starting Monday morning, and they're mad if you're not. Like, no, we're not doing that. So I think it went pretty well last year. We instituted a 48-hour rule. You know, there's times where the family there's a need to put them on the bus next day, or they're not going to be in school. So it does get overridden a little bit from time to time by administration. But for the most part, Lori's become the enforcer. So she's got a big hammer in the office, and she swings it. That's a great question, Ken. That's why we have reinforcements. Well, we're working right now on a document that is going to hopefully give us some guidance on. The CDC has the guidelines, you know, as to what the proper steps are for quarantining, and 14 days are the right steps. Now, if you test negative, I believe it's like 2 to 3 days total. If you've got symptoms and then you get your test, and you can return to work right away. Yeah, if you've got symptoms, you know, some people are choosing to quarantine. If you've got, the testing is more rapid now too, you know, and so there's a big difference if you went in and got tested in April versus are getting tested now. But the logic here is it would hold true for students and drivers and staff, everybody the same. If you are displaying symptoms, don't come to work. If you are, you know, if you've got tested and you're positive, you're going to be quarantining for 14 days. If you've been exposed, but you have not yourself tested positive, then there's steps and guidelines on that. So we'll talk more about that on the 17th, because I'll have that clarified a little bit at that point. But that's a great question, because it's one that teachers have too, is what about this? What about that? And yeah. This is the part where it gets into a fluid situation. Not planning to right now. that could evolve. And let me get into then a little bit of why it might evolve. The South Dakota High School Activities Association just released today they had a committee, what's the right word I'm looking for here? The focus group or a task force, thank you, geez. A task force dedicated to talking about should we have fall sports or not, fall activities or not. And they met a few times and they made a recommendation and put a document out today. The Board of Control is going to meet on Wednesday to vote on it. But their recommendation is to proceed with opening activities and on schedule and offering all the things that we're planning to offer. There has not been a statewide directive to open schools, but there isn't a statewide directive to not open schools. So they've turned it over to local control, and that really puts the irony here is, when we're talking about funding and we're all fighting for table scraps, they want control and peer. But when we're talking about making decisions about safety and opening schools, they don't want anything to do with it. They want local. They're all for local control. So there's a lot of irony in this, but it's going to be a tough thing because if Yankton's doing this and Gayville is doing something different, or Menno or Irene, or you pick the school, parents are already peppering us with questions. Well, if you guys don't open up, by God, I'm sending my kids to Gayville, or I'm sending my kids to Irene. Okay, well, that'll certainly be your choice. We don't want that, but that'll be your choice. Conversely, if you guys try and have school, I'm not sending my kids. It's not, we're in a pandemic. Don't you know that? What's wrong with you guys? You've got people on both extremes, and it's going to be that way for quite some time. So what our approach to reopening school is going to be, we've recommended to the school board to open on time, August 24th. And the question over mask mandates is still up in the air, but I've shared with you how I think it's going to come out, and I would not be at all surprised if masks are mandatory, at least for the first quarter of the school year on school property. Now the next question gets into, well, what about Friday night at Crane Youngworth? Or how are you going to have a mask, when that just pops into my head. You got 3,000 people at a football game, you're going to make all those people wear masks? Possibly. I don't know that. That was all in that big packet that came out today from the Activities Association. They're turning it all over to local school districts to make those decisions. So in the coming weeks, it's going to be an awfully big task for Ryan Moores and Jennifer Jonke and the whole admin team to interpret what the Activities Association task force put out today and put it into practice before school starts and get that communicated to families. So I think at the end of the day, busing is pretty minor in terms of those decisions that parents are going to be faced with. So I'm not really expecting massive uproar over whether to ride a bus or not. That's going to be a personal choice. And families, you make that choice. I'm not forcing you one way or the other. Here's the service. You're welcome to take advantage, but you got to sign this waiver. And they'll be pissed, I know that, but considering the alternative is take them to school, they may or may not have that luxury. So the activities then, how that's going to look in that recommendation from the task force, their recommendation, they tiered it out according to mandates, highly recommended, and there was another term they used, and I don't remember what it was, but the highly recommended was students and drivers tested before they ride on activity trips and masks mandatory. So we really can't have a situation where this letter says masks highly encouraged on a bus route, but mandatory over here on an activity trip. That doesn't make any sense. So you have to understand this is all very fluid, and as you get a little bit more information, a little bit more guidance, you have to put it all together, and we could literally right up till the Friday before school starts, tweak it, or after school starts and say, okay, the first activity trips are actually before school starts, so I think soccer might be the first out-of-town activity this year on August 14th. So, here's another new one that we're kicking the tires on. We have not historically allowed families or allowed kids to go with their families to games. We may allow that this year and have them sign a waiver that says, you're on your own, to get the kid to the game, be there at this time, and because they're not going to want to put their kids on a bus. That's their right to do that. So for this, everything that I'm telling you about is going to apply to the 2020-21 school year. This is not permanent, and we will absolutely revise it if the pandemic is deemed to be under control and, we get into the planning for the 21-22 school year. We will absolutely go back to, there's no such thing as waiving, riding to an event. You'll ride the school provided transportation. You may sign off your kid to not ride home. We do that all the time. But riding to the event this year may well be an option for families. And so we'll just deal with that as well. Because there was a time where I was talking with Tim and Tony, activity trips, you've got a band trip and you take 4 buses to get, that's a big group of kids you're moving. Is that now going to require 8 buses? I mean, really, if you think about trying to be safe, so suddenly we've got 11 daily routes, 4 special ed buses, and 8 buses for band on a Friday in Chamberlain. Oh, by the way, there's football in Spearfish, and there's cross country in Norfolk, and so everybody in this room, there may be days, you all know when those are. You look in the garage, you're like, oh my God, all the vehicles are gone, and it's hard to get all the routes covered. So we're expecting that the schedule will hold, and we're going to have those really heavy days, but I'm not expecting to send double the activity buses out at this point, because if we mandate masks on the activity bus, parents, take your kid to the game or contest or ride the bus. And there may be a waiver on that, I don't know. There won't be scan cards, and I would envision that being more of the coach at the beginning of the season. Your roster, and every family, you collect your waiver up front, and when they board that they've got a waiver to ride. Interesting stuff, and you guys thought I don't do anything in the summer, huh? So questions on that before we change gears on reopening plans. I do the best I can to answer things, but flexibility, patience, and willing to adapt, because it could be kind of quick if things change. I haven't really thought about that. Nobody has told me, hey, waive that, but we really don't go at the $5 replacement fee with the intent of profiting. It's more of a deterrent, hey, this is important, keep your card. So I think it'll be in place, but I'm not going to fight anybody over $5. Having the card is more important to me than somebody who can't afford $5. But I also recognize that if you don't have a deterrent, you're issuing a lot of cards to kids because they just don't care. Any other questions at this point with reopening plans? If you're interested, we just set another school board meeting for Tuesday the 28th, and our board meetings are right here now so that we can spread everybody out. This setup was from last week where we had Byron type off every other row, and we've set it up on the website now to live stream. And so if you can't come in person but you want to listen, it'll be at 5 o'clock on the school website, and we'll be right here talking about the use of masks and whether or not to mandate. And then I suspect a final decision will probably be made on reopening plans August 13th or 12th or whatever the second Monday in August is.
Just know those meetings can go real long, as Tony found out when his phone died at the last one. So if you're going to be watching on your phone and streaming that, make sure you're plugged in.
Yeah,
Almost 3 hours.
yeah, the regular school board meetings rarely last more than an hour, but that was not during a pandemic. Bus driver meeting, August 17th. Yeah, and so that way, my theory there was get that set, get it on your calendars, so that we can actually, is that what we said, 5 to 7, I think we said on that one. Yeah, but school board meetings, July 28th, that's what we're talking about.
We probably won't have supper.
No, as much as I'd like to feed you, we can't do that right now. That's just not.
Bring your own food.
Bring a bottle of water. And I'm sorry, I never even thought about that for tonight. So we can take a quick break if we need to here before we get into anything else. But I don't want to keep you here all night. This is really unique. And so I thought, gosh, I haven't talked to several of you since March. And there's a lot in play. So I want to get you together and have a quick update. And then you're going to be a little more tuned in now as to what's going on. And as you read it in the P&D, it'll kind of tie everything together. And then as we get to August 17th, that'll be the more traditional, in years past, we've done training and had people come in. Well, we're not going to mess around with that. This year, that August 17th agenda, I'm going to have the school nurses come in, and we're going to talk about, what the classrooms are going to look like, because it's important that we set our bus environment up to mirror what the kids are going to have in the classroom, as far as some conduct and what is acceptable and what is not acceptable with touching and, masking and distancing and all those kinds of things. So we do have a video that I want to play. Dr. Pietola talking to, I'm sorry, I don't know her name, but with emergency management, doing a little bit of a COVID update. And just, Dr. Pietola has been in the front of this thing in Yankton since the very beginning, talking about and reassuring people of what they know as doctors and making sure that we don't have bad information floating around. So I came across a video in late June on Facebook where they just posted it, and he was talking to her about what they knew at that moment in time, and that was about a 15-minute conversation. Well, Tim found online there's even a more recent one where they must be doing this like every other week. So we're going to play that video here for you, and you can just listen to what Dr. Pietola has to say about the current information and what they know, and then we'll take a quick break if anybody needs it, and then we'll come back and we'll wrap up with a few loose ends. Okay? Is that going to play for you? Are you going to need to do anything, Matt, or is it all controlled at the PC level?
What's that?
You know what, while we're setting that up, let's flip this around. Why don't you guys, if anybody needs a quick break, let's do that first. Feel free to grab some water or restroom, and then we'll come back and we'll have this ready to go in case Matt has to come down here. So.
Is it up there yet, Matt? Said I can email him a link.
Reset this guy here.
The only thing I would say is like when you ask a question, you're gonna repeat it. Like when they ask a question,
You can't pick that up?
so if you wanted to
Oh, I keep forgetting to do that.
to go?
Oh, go ahead, Mayor, you.
So right now looks good?
County Office of Emergency Management Public Information Officer. And today we are joined by Dr. Michael Pietla, Dr. Scott Hiltonen, who Facebook Live. My name is Sharon.
Too late. You already caught it. I was catching up to cut a long point out. Yep.
All right, let's go ahead and get going here. I'd like to be respectful of everybody's time, and we all have stuff to do tonight yet, so. I think most people are back. I guess if somebody's not, we'll catch them when they get here. So I'm going to go ahead and start this. And I think it's they'll do their own introductions and go
Sherry
from there.
Hoffman. I'm the Yankton County Office of Emergency Management Public Information Officer. And today we are joined by Dr. Michael Pietla, Dr. Scott Hiltonen, who hasn't shown up yet, but he may be busy to a schedule, and so obviously we forgive him for that. So we'll talk with Dr. Pietla. Dr. Pietla, if you wouldn't mind starting out with your name, occupation, all of that good stuff.
Sure. First, I'd say Scott's, excuse me, working over at the hospital today, so he might be busy with patients.
Absolutely.
So I'm Dr. Michael Pietla. I'm a pulmonary critical care and internal medicine physician at the Yankton Medical Clinic. Also a medical director of the ICU and chair of the Department of Medicine at the hospital here in town. Also a professor at the University of South Dakota School of Medicine, and someone who has special training in pandemic management and things like COVID-19.
Thank you. Obviously, COVID-19 has been a big topic for us for several months that we've been working with it. I noticed that today the number for Yankton County went to 71, which is only up 1, but then the number of deaths for the state of South Dakota went up 3 and now at 87. So it's a lot less than our surrounding neighbors, for example, Minnesota, all the others. Do you think that wearing the masks and doing all the sanitation is working? Should we be doing more? Or are we maybe overkilling it?
So those are great questions. I think each day we learn more about the virus and about its effects in our communities. And I think if you look at places that have been less diligent about social distancing and wearing a mask and have opened up, as we say, places like Texas and Arizona, California and Florida, they're seeing a surge in cases. Just looking at the data change in the United States, there was a record number of cases, 37,945 yesterday. That's the highest that we've had in the state so far. If you look at the curve, our curve is compared to other nations where they're, more strict about isolation and mandating masks. Their curves are coming down, not just flat, but actually heading downward. Countries where they're not being strict about that, such as the United States, not only is our curve had been remaining, elevated, flat, but elevated, we're now seeing a steady rise again. And so, what are we doing differently in the Midwest? Well, number one, just by our nature, we're less dense of a population. And so we're not prone to gathering indoors in close quarters like places where the population is greater. So that's giving us some protection. But the virus, doesn't respect borders, and it will eventually find its way to all of us, especially if we gather indoors in close quarters, not wearing a mask.
That's true. I hear some chatter, and I try to read everything and make a good decision based upon my own judgments, which isn't always a great judgment, by the way. I've had a lot of chatter lately about folks who are saying, we don't need to wear the mask. Why don't we just rip them all off and try to get herd immunity? Can you speak? Is that even a possibility with this type of virus?
Yeah, so there's herd immunity. Let's just talk about what that is first. Herd immunity is when enough of the population becomes infected with the virus and then develops immunity. So it's not just about enough people getting infected. You also have to become immune after you're infected. And we're not confident that there's 100% guarantee once you've had it that you're immune. There's data out there suggesting that you might develop the antibodies, which indicate the possibility of immunity, but then they might, decrease in their potency to fight the virus as time goes on. So there's that caveat that just by getting the virus doesn't mean you're immune. And then enough people have to become immune for the virus to run out of hosts, to run out of people who it can infect, so that the pandemic ends and you just see sporadic cases of the virus like the common cold. And we think that number is around 70%. And in order to get to 70% of our population, if we rush to herd immunity, the collateral damage is going to be significant. I mean, we've already seen 125,000 deaths in the United States. If you look at numbers across the world, we've got 4 million confirmed cases and 124,000 deaths. Worldwide, there's been 9.4 million. So we've got nearly, over a quarter of the cases happening in the United States compared to worldwide. And there's only 483,000 deaths across the world. We got 124,000 of them. And if we try to rush to herd immunity by telling those who are susceptible to stay indoors, allow the rest of us to go out and, infect one another, that death number is going to rise dramatically. Our hospital systems are going to be overwhelmed, similar to what's happening in Texas, Houston in particular. And so there's several flaws in the logic that we can rush to herd immunity. What we need is a vaccine to help us make people immune without getting infected. And we need to continue to social distance and practice wearing a mask. Let me just speak to that a little bit more. We're learning more and more that really the way that you get this virus is through droplets, not so much, and probably not through aerosolization and not from another surface. Mostly it's from droplets. And so the way that droplets get from me, if I'm infected, to you is when we're in close quarters within 6 feet of one another for 15 minutes. Doesn't have to be cumulative 15 minutes. It can be 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there in a 24-hour period. And we're not wearing a mask, so that our droplets are being projected to you when you then breathe them in or get them on your hands and touch your face or your eyes. And so outdoors, it seems that this doesn't transmit nearly as much as it does indoors. If you look at these large gatherings with the protests that have occurred, we're not seeing a big spike in cases when they test people who have attended these protests. And so I'm not mandating or suggesting a mandate to wear masks outdoors or around, your close family contacts who you know where they've been and you know if they have or don't have symptoms. But if you're in a public place and you're indoors, wearing a mask will significantly decrease the risk of transmission of the virus from you to someone else. And it also, less so, but also protects you from exposure to droplets from someone who might have the virus. And wearing masks is very safe. We wear them all day in the hospital. Our nurses come in to do a 12-hour shift and they have a mask on the entire time. Now, I'm talking about simple masks. I'm not talking about these N95 respirators. Once you get to an N95 or a more restrictive respirator mask, then chronic lung disease could potentially make it unwise for you to wear that type of mask. But a surgical mask or a simple cloth mask is perfectly safe. You can't rebreathe the virus. It doesn't cause low oxygen. You can't get carbon dioxide poisoning from a cloth mask or a surgical mask.
Good point. I'd read that as well. So good. Does everyone who has COVID or had COVID, do they produce the antibodies, or is it only certain people produce them?
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about how we become immune to something unlike a virus. So immunity is not just about the antibodies. I'll talk about the antibodies. It's about other factors too. It's about, other issues with your health. If you have certain medical conditions like diabetes, heart disease, lung disease, cancers, all sorts of different conditions, your immune system can be impaired by those diseases alone. And then having the antibody alone doesn't necessarily protect you from infection. So does everybody produce the antibody? We're still in the process of trying to better understand that, but it looks like in preliminary testing, when we'd expect a population to have, maybe 10 or 15% exposure, and therefore testing individuals would show 10 or 15% antibodies, we're not seeing that. We're seeing closer to 3 or 5%. Antibodies take time to develop, and maybe we're testing people too early. I've tested a few people who have had the virus, and some have had the antibody and some haven't. And so I think the jury's still out on whether or not, once you're infected and recover, that you're definitely immune because you have antibodies. I think it's too soon to say that that's the case for sure.
Can a person get COVID-19 a second time?
Again, we don't know that for sure. I think, if you look at typical coronaviruses, I know this one's a novel one, influenza viruses, generally, if you get it once, you're not likely to get it again. It's extremely low likelihood. And so I think, without being able to say it definitively, that once you have it and recover, you're not likely, I think the percentage is very low that there'd be a chance that you would get the same COVID-19 coronavirus again.
I suppose there's not enough data yet because we're still fighting the first round, let alone a second round of it.
Right. So we're still early in the pandemic, to be honest, and that's why there's just a tendency to say, instead of wanting to continue to do what's working effectively here in Yankton and in South Dakota in general by isolating and being very cautious, let's just kind of pretend it's not around. And even if I get it, I'm not going to be that sick. So let's just go back to normal activity. And I'm not so concerned about a second surge of the coronavirus because it's going to infect someone who's already had it. It's just as we come to the winter months when we all tend to be indoors more, school starts and we have sporting events and we're gathering in closer quarters, that we'll see a rise in cases. And we really need, as a community, to work together to think of ways to prevent that from happening, and then also to protect ourselves from the typical wintertime flu season. We see 50,000 deaths a year in the United States from the flu, and we have an effective and safe vaccine, and not enough people get it. That's just a simple fact, and there's a lot of reasons for that. And I think as a community, I want to see us work together to get information out about the flu vaccine. Without the flu vaccine, we'd have pandemic flu outbreaks repeatedly. The vaccine is the key, and we're not vaccinating enough people. Let's find a way to get the vaccine to all of us, find a way to help people understand the importance of it. It's not just something that you should get if you have time. It's something that all of us should be getting. And I'm going to be working with some of our community members to try and improve our flu vaccination numbers.
Good. That's great news. Do you, in your opinion, have we flattened the curve well enough, or do we need to do more? What can the average person on the street do to help ensure that this doesn't ramp up out of control?
Sure. I think continue to be aware of the situations and the people around you. Social distancing, we don't have an effective treatment for coronavirus. You've heard about the dexamethasone trial. It helps. It reduces death if you end up on the ventilator by a percentage. It reduces death if your oxygen level is low because of severe pneumonia, but it's not going to cure everybody. It's going to help maybe 5 to 15% of people who are really sick. So still 85 to 95% of people, can die from it. What works? Social distance. Okay, we know this is transmitted primarily through droplets, as I said before. Stay 6 feet away from people, especially people you don't know, especially when you're indoors. Okay, outdoor activities, much safer than indoor activities, it appears, with respect to transmissibility. Hand hygiene. So that's something, we should have been practicing better prior to the pandemic, is washing our hands and using hand sanitizer. And then masks. So the data is out there. The science is real. The facts are that wearing a mask, especially when indoors, reduces the risk of you transmitting the virus to someone else. So those 3 things: social distance, good hand hygiene, wear a mask when in public places, indoors, masks are most important.
Thank you. Is there any final message or any thought that you'd like to share?
I think what I would say is I think we're all doing a really good job, and recognize that we are, and no one wants this virus to be around. We want it to go away. We want to be back to not having to worry about it, and we're making that happen. And if we can continue to be cautious, get back to living our life, but doing it in a fashion that respects our space around others and the chance that we could harm them, we're prepared for more cases. Our hospital's got the PPE ready now. Our spaces, right now we have plenty of space for sick patients. If this gets worse, we can manage it. We've got better understanding of how to treat it. So don't be fearful of what's coming in the future. We don't know what that's going to be. I say be cautiously optimistic that we can continue on the flat curve that we have locally, especially, but across the state of South Dakota, until a vaccine comes. And, Dr. Fauci and a couple of other experts said maybe by the end of this year, maybe by the turn of the year. And so we can just, remain optimistic, make the most of the day that we have, continue to be respectful of our fellow community members, and keep each other safe. We'll come through this just fine.
Great. Those are always good words. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it, Dr. Pep.
Have a good day.
You too.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Okay, I think it's pretty straightforward, but I'm not really the one to answer questions or question anything Dr. Pietola says. He certainly has been in the forefront of everything that we've been following for guidance in Yankton during this all started. So I thought the value, though, of hearing that is hearing from the people that we are following, as school administrators, and making sure that we all have the right information going forward. And we'll do the best we can to keep you posted, but that's probably stuff that many of you have seen or saw it on Facebook or wherever other sources you look for that. But in my opinion, that was definitely, I'll minimize that, get all that out of there. There you go. And definitely worth watching. So I want to come back to a couple more loose ends, COVID, and then I want to move on because, frankly, I'm tired of talking about COVID. Let's see, we've got... So a couple more safety protocols, and then I'm going to have Tim, we've got one more video we're going to show here about this hydrostatic sprayer, but we're going to make a couple changes, just simple things too, with the driver lounge. We're going to have, I don't know if this is all done yet or not, or if it's in the works, we're actually going to have our driver lounge out in the shop area. Okay, so spread it out a little bit, get out of the small room. So we're going to take the tables and chairs out of there. You can still pass through there and use the bathroom, use the mailbox. Actually, the mailboxes will be in the outer area too. But that was a simple thing that we thought was important, that we don't want to encourage people to be sitting in close quarters any more than we have to. So when you come out to the bus shop, you're going to see, if you come now, it may be still in the process of being set up, but in the next couple of weeks, that'll be finalized and just have more space to roam around out there. But, I don't want to discourage you from coming in and grabbing a cup of coffee and shooting the breeze with your colleagues and whatnot. I mean, there's no reason to discourage that, but we just have to be smart about it. So that'll be a change that we're going to put in, and we'll probably just leave it there until, there's a reason to go back to being in the smaller space. Going down the line, I talked about the school board meeting, and so that's a check off the list. Sorry, I got to find the sweet spot on my contacts here. God, getting old sucks. There already are progressive lenses, so I got to get to that spot. So I mentioned a little bit about busing being the same as what we've done in the past. And what we're going to do, we're going to continue to do the Boys and Girls Club. And that's something we met with Cody. Forget Mathisen, is that how you pronounce her last name? She's the new executive director. She took over in March, about 2 weeks before COVID shut everything down. So she was drinking through a fire hose for sure. But she's been great to work with and very open to working with us and partnering with us in any way that they can. So what we're going to do is we're going to continue to provide the bus service, the morning shuttle, from the academy to the schools. We'll continue to have Daryl's bus do that as we've done in the past. And in the afternoon, we'll continue to do our afternoon load up at the schools, distribute to the exchange, do a full exchange. I talked earlier about trying to minimize kids crossing paths. There's just no good way of doing that in the afternoons to avoid. We talked about, can we avoid the exchange? But that would require all of you to cycle through all the 6 schools, and that takes 25 to 30 minutes. Well, we're not going to have staggered dismissal times to be able to make that happen, and we all know that traffic sucks in the afternoon. So there's just no good way to do that. Yes. Yep, the Boys and Girls Club kids, they're going to work with us and use our form. And, they were trying to get it to where, or they thought they could get it to where they were, when you sign up for the Boys and Girls Club, that includes our waiver, or our waiver includes the Boys and Girls Club, or could we have just one card, one size fits all? The answer is no. Those databases are so complex, and it sounds good in theory, but we're not going to change our process to match up with them. They've got a separate process that matches up with their corporate. It's just the kids are going to have 2 cards. They're going to have their Boys and Girls Club card, they're going to have their school card, and it's the way it is.
Well, I was going to say, that being said, tomorrow we're going to take one of our cards that's printed on one side to them. They're going to try to print their card on the other. So there's a possibility of that. I'm not going to say it's going to happen, but we're going to experiment with one card would have, one side be theirs, one side be ours, so
Yeah,
we'll see where that goes.
we're gonna start with the same thing the way we ended last year. So again, going back to this waiver concept, you know, if you, as a parent, if you're comfortable with that and you're willing to sign the waiver, here's the bus. If you aren't comfortable, then you've got to get your kid to the Boys and Girls Club. That'll be your responsibility. And, you know, that's just something that we don't want to kill the Boys and Girls Club, because if we don't provide that bus service, there are families that'll have a hard time getting their kids to the club. That's just a fact. And, you know, if they want to have their kids wear a mask on the bus, you know, we could be at a point where it's mandatory to wear a mask. And then they don't know that yet either.
What she told us is they're gonna mimic our operation. If we're full on, they'll be full on. If we're every other day, they're gonna do every other day. Which means if a kid goes to school, they can go to the club. If it's their day to be home, they can't go to the club. So they're just gonna mimic what we do.
Yeah, if you know, I should have talked about during our reopening plan, our priority one is to open all day, every day. There is a fallback position, I'll call it, that if we have a spike in cases in Yankton, the school calendar then would stay intact and we would shift into every other day for kids. So school, the teachers would be here every day. All of us, you know, would do our jobs every day, but you would have A through K would be red day, L through Z would be black day, or whatever color scheme you want to use. But that's the logic behind it. Now, that has not been totally finalized or to know which kid goes on which day, but the logic would be if you keep your family together because of jobs and daycare and all of those kinds of things. If we had to get to that alternating day setup for distancing purposes, that would still be better in a lot of people's opinion than no school, because of, you know, how hard it was for so many families. And you know, but that scenario too, parents have a choice. You know, if the cases increase, keep your kid home. We'll shift instantly into the online learning, and they'll do the best they can with trying to keep the kids. I mean, there's been ideas, well, can't you just live stream everything? Well, that would be great if we had a whole bunch of technology and a whole bunch of bandwidth to be able to do it. It's just not, our infrastructure isn't such to be able to do that. And our teachers need to learn how to do that, and those things don't happen overnight. But I think we're in a way better place academically to seamlessly move from online, or from in school to online and back to in school. I mean, I think that's just going to go better, but that's for the people that deal with that to worry about, and not so much for us. Therein lies, again, why I wanted to keep our bus routes consistent, because if we move from all day, every day, everybody at school, to some alternating schedule, in my mind anyway, you would still drive your regular route. And you would then, you know, they would have to give us lists of who's on which day, and we would probably shape that a little bit, and you'd know then, oh, okay, these stops are all red, I don't need to make that stop today, but it would still be routed that way, and you just bypass and move on to the next stop. But that might take a few days to work out the rough edges if we had to make that transition. So I hope that makes sense. Are there any questions on that logic and how that would look? Okay. More safety measures. So this one is, again, going to be tough to enforce, but it'll be zero tolerance. We're not going to have any guests on the bus. No birthday party riders, no staying overnight, you know, hey, it's more convenient, can my buddy ride home because mom works late tonight? The answer is no. You need to be signed. Yeah, and I think Heather and Todd, they understand that, and they're going to do everything they can. Now, is it perfect? And, you know, we're not going to leave a child at the middle school that they had it all worked out, and then, okay, sayonara, we're leaving you. That's not going to be good, because we don't want any kids getting abducted or any, you know, and you don't either. But the logic is, the more we can talk about those things, look, families, you just got to use some common sense. This is not the time. You want to have a birthday party, that's fine, but make your own transportation arrangement. You can't use the school bus for that. And that might be hard for some people. And when parents sign up for service, you know, we get lots of different requests. Well, you know, I work at 5 o'clock in the morning, and so we need to sign up, pick up at grandma's house out in the country. I am still going to allow those scenarios because I don't want to discourage kids from coming to school. So that would be, you know, you're signed up for service and your pickup happens to be grandma's. but we're not saying those that ride once a blue moon, that they're not gonna be routed and placed on the bus routes, at least now, not now. So there's just gonna be case by case on a lot of those scenarios, and you know your families, and you're gonna have some kids that we have to lean on you to use good judgment, but that judgment starts with don't leave kids behind, and we'll work through what other scenarios we have to work through. I already touched on the rules on the bus, and we're gonna have that on our school website. So look at our website, because I think that'll help you to understand what the parents' perspective is and what they see. But there's a whole page now dedicated to bus transportation.
You're still only doing in town in the morning, right?
Yep.
Now, I used to have about 5 kids that would come get on the bus at high school, and they were in town, and they'd ride up to the middle school.
You're talking in the mornings.
Now, are you gonna allow that at all this year, or?
Well, I'm gonna go back to, you gotta be signed up for service. I mean, if there's kids that, if it's for activity purposes, did they have like an early morning practice and then they were catching a ride to the middle school to go to school?
No,
No, they're in-town kids that would ride to the middle school and then walk home. We have-
Oh, in the afternoon, just for convenience, like a little shuttle. Yeah,
instead of them walking from high school all the way to the east side of town, they'd jump in with me,
yeah.
and there for a while, or so, they didn't need cards, so.
Yeah, that's not unique to your bus, unfortunately. The answer is, prefer they not. Part two to that answer is, I'm not gonna come over here and chase them down. I mean, that's something where if you know what's going on, I think this is our opportunity to kind of clean some of that up and say, look, you gotta be signed up for service. And when they call and sign up for service to catch a ride, why would we do that? Why would we wanna cram more kids on a bus and make it riskier?
But see, they have a morning pass,
Oh, yeah, I see what you're saying.
they're in town.
Yeah, but they won't be on, they shouldn't be on your list.
They won't be in your actual list.
Right.
Although you don't have, I mean, is that,
Dean, I would tell you, enforce it to the extent that you can. It's not my focus right now, and if you've got room on your bus for that afternoon shuttle, I'm not gonna fight with people over that. It's just not worth it. Because there's a certain amount of people that, since we passed that property tax opt-out, they believe that they're entitled to whatever service they feel they need. And there's that mentality, and then there's the mentality of, well, you got room on the bus, that's stupid, why can't my kid just jump on? This year, with COVID, I would say, well, I do have a compelling reason, because that's too many kids on the bus. If you've got 50 kids already, 5 more kids on a big, that's too many kids. No, you gotta find a different way. But if you've only got 15 kids,
I just didn't want to deny them, and then they go and talk to someone in the office, and the office says, well, that's fine, you should give them a ride. So
well,
that's
that's a hard one to enforce. I guess pick your battles. I don't have a good answer for you on that. Let's wait and see what we've got for numbers, and you may look at and you're just doing an afternoon transfer though, so we really won't have a good handle on how many kids will be going to the exchange.
always had room, it was just, they're not carded, so nobody didn't know they were on the bus.
Yeah, but they're scanning on because they do have, it is imperative they have the waiver. So if they've got an in-town pass, at least they have the ability to scan onto the bus. If they don't have a scan card, no ride. Well, if they don't have the proper colored card, no ride. But what he's saying is a scenario that they have this card by way of they've signed up for our in-town service. They're not assigned to Dean's bus. They just ride in the morning, catch a ride at one of our planned in-town stops. So they could flash the card, and Dean doesn't know where they go at the end. So this card will tell you as a driver you've got the waiver. So I would say, choose your battles. Okay? Let's get into the safety protocols then, and some things that we're going to add into the pre-trip inspection. I know you're probably wondering who the heck's going to run this thing and how are we going to get that done. So before we watch the video on how it works, I've talked to John Coffrin, and what we're going to do in the mornings, the logic here is to disinfect the buses twice a day, once before they go out in the morning and once when they come back in the morning. And then they would be presumably clean for the afternoon, ready to go. So then overnight, park the bus and all the germs, everything settles. John will come in the next morning, blast all the buses with the hydrostatic sprayer, early before you come in, and then you'd be ready to roll. So we'd have them cleaned before and after your morning run. And that should accomplish the task here, because otherwise, if we're cleaning before and after the morning, and then you come out in the afternoon and clean again before the afternoon, well, nobody's been on that bus since the morning. That doesn't make a lot of sense. So I'm hoping that for the morning drivers, by John doing the early morning part, that you incorporate into your schedule then to hit the bus and use these things. We bought several of them. There should be 3 total. Is that right, for the drivers?
On the sped side, and then there'll be 2 on the other side.
And these things, I don't know all the ins and outs. I'll let Tim talk. He's done all the research and been practicing with them. But if we can have your help, just walk up and down the aisle and do the fog mist, hit the touch areas with sanitary wipes, and making sure, your driver area is clean. That's really the extent of what we're going to be able to do on the buses for cleaning. I don't expect, and your standard sweeping and all the things that you already do. But this would be the extra step this year for COVID readiness. So we'll have John do the morning side. Now, sped drivers, we have to work out how you're going to do yours, because you have more coming and going. So we're going to have to figure that out. But these things are pretty lightweight. With chemical in, if you're doing a lot of buses in a row, it can get a little bit heavy. So we're looking at getting a backpack style. That would make that even easier, that you sling it over your shoulder and just walk up and down and spray the stuff on the seats. The chemical that we're looking at or going to be using does not have, you don't have to have a hazmat suit to put this stuff on. It's not something where you're going to be exposed to chemicals. It's chemically changing household products to make them into a cleaner. And Tim can talk more about that in detail, but we'll watch the video first so you have a little bit of an idea of how this works, and then we'll come back and talk about the details and part of the pre-trip process that you'll do and who's going to do all that kind of work, and then we'll get into that kind of conversation. So do you want to cue that video, or is it already queued up on the...
I didn't have it queued up.
And is it linked from your laptop yet?
Well, you had it linked from that document, so.
Oh, is it in there? In the letter? Or which
This
document are you
working.
talking about? Which document were you talking about?
The agenda.
Oh.
You had a link on the agenda,
Oh,
so.
I'll just type
If it works. Well, he's doing that quick, just so you know, this video is going to talk about Brulin brew tabs. Now, what they are is the chemical process of creating hypochlorous acid versus the version that we're going to do. So it's the same chemical, but you guys won't be required to mix it. It'll be pre-mixed in the gallon jugs like you see there. So all you'll have to do is fill it if it needs it. In addition, because this is not chemically based, you won't have to empty it after every use either. But we will have some of these tabs. I put in an order for those today, so we will have some as a backup if we need them. But hypochlorous acid is something your body makes as part of its immune response. It's a flat disinfectant. It's very effective. You can breathe it in, you can drink it won't hurt you at all. And that's the sheet that you got, an SDS sheet that I gave to everybody. If you look at the PPE and the first aid requirements, there's none. First aid, they just say, well, if you have irritation. Well, this is something that's in your body already, so you shouldn't have any irritation. But there's always that one person out in the world that's going to say, oh, so they say if, just a precaution. But I've used this stuff at home most of the summer now. Works really great. It gets rid of odors. Believe it or not, wet dog smell. I just douse the dog with this stuff, rub it into his fur, wet dog smell gone. It works real good stuff. So we'll watch the video. It'll show you how to use the tabs. Again, you won't necessarily have to do that. We'll pre-mix it, but it'll show you how to use the sprayer.
For many students, their day begins and ends on a school bus. In order to combat the spread of germs, it's important for school transportation vehicles to have a high-touch disinfection program in place, in addition to routine interior surface cleaning procedures. The combination of BrewTab 6S disinfectant tablets and the electrostatic delivery of the Victory sprayer is an efficient and cost-effective disinfection program. In this video, we will look at the proper ways to utilize BrewTab 6S and the Victory sprayer to quickly disinfect high touch points on a school bus. Begin by preparing the Victory sprayer for use with the BrewTab 6S tablet. To do this, rotate the tank lock to the unlock position. pull the pin to release the sprayer tank. Fill the tank with 1 quart or 32 ounces of clean water. Add 1 BrewTab 6S 3.3 gram tablet to the tank. Allow the tablet to completely dissolve for 4 to 5 minutes before using. Reattach and lock the tank to the sprayer. The Victory sprayer is equipped with 3 different spray settings to correspond to the dwell times needed for your disinfectant to work. When using BrewTab 6S, set the nozzle to the 80 micron setting. Allow for adequate ventilation on the bus by keeping the door open until disinfection is completed. Begin in the front of the bus with the driver's area, spraying all high-touch areas such as handrails, grab bars, gear shift, and door lever. Optimum sprayer distance is about 2 feet away from the target area. The 80 micron setting on the sprayer will provide a 10-minute contact time to ensure all the surfaces are fully disinfected. Continue on the driver's side, moving to the back of the bus, spraying from high to low, making sure to spray windows, seats, and seat backs. After spraying the exit door in the back, move to the other side of the bus and repeat the process, moving towards the front. Finish at the bus door. Spray the door's interior from high to low. Exit the bus. Close the door and spray the door's exterior. BrewTab 6S is designed to kill a wide variety of microorganisms, while also being safe enough to spray on most surfaces. After spraying is complete, the bus will be ready for use after 10 to 15 minutes. After using the Victory sprayer, remove the tank and refer to the product label for proper disposal of unused solution. Rinse the tank with water. For preventative maintenance, fill the tank with clean water and spray for 1 to 2 minutes to fully clean the spray nozzle, internal pump, and the supply lines. Do not store the sprayer with leftover solution in the tank. With the combination of BrewTab 6S disinfectant tablets and the Victory electrostatic sprayer, fighting germs just got easier.
All right, so that sprayer is really easy to use. For you guys, it'll be set up out there. We're gonna have 2 different stations out on the other side that'll have gallon jugs of the fluid and the stuff. You know, like they said, you just have to unlock it, drop it. When you're done, you just lock it back, okay? On-off switch on the top, you just turn it on, and then you spray. The nice thing about this stuff is you don't have to worry like the rails going on the bus. You don't have to try to get underneath. It's electrostatic, which means it's electrically charged, so as it approaches a surface, it just attracts to it and clings, which means it's going to wrap around things as it goes, okay? So it should be a nice, quick, even thing. You don't have to spend a lot of time. Just spray it and move to the next section. Very fast. John did 1 bus in 3 minutes and 40 seconds the other day. That's how fast. You just top to bottom, each seat go through. The mist will do its own thing after that. So they're really good. Like I said, after 1 bus, you're okay. 2 buses, they start to get heavy. 3 buses, well, that's why we got the backpack, because John is not going to be able to do 11 buses every day like that. When you get on your bus up near your window somewhere, you're going to have a suction cup attached to the window, and there will be a green and a red placard. It'll be reversible. If you get on your bus and you see green, that means it was disinfected. If it's red, you need to question that and either disinfect your bus or come see us, all right? So it's going to be crucial that as drivers, you remember, first thing you do when you sit down in the seat, turn the placard. The bus is now contaminated, all right? So that when you end your run, we'll come through, disinfect, or you'll disinfect and turn it back to green, or in the morning, John will disinfect and turn them back to green. Same with an activities bus or a substitution bus. If you go to that bus and it's red, you need to question that. It will need to be disinfected or something prior to you getting on. So that's one of the protocols that we're doing with this stuff. Now, it's hypochlorous acid. It's completely safe. Like I said, your body makes it. There should be no health concerns. There are no PPE concerns. Just spray this stuff and go, all right? The chemical version is a little bit different. They do have some PPE because it's made with chemicals as opposed to what we do is I have coffee pot size canisters in the office. I put water in it, and then, I mean, we're talking a minute amount of kosher salt and a minute amount of vinegar, and then we plug it into the wall and it cooks it. And it takes about 8 minutes to make. So make it a liter and a half at a time, and then we dump it into that, and then we'll keep that supplied out there. But we will have the tabs in a backup situation, and if we have to go to those, then we might change the protocols. We'll have to look at that. But as you can see on the video, even their guy with them, they didn't bother to dress him up or put him in a gown. So shouldn't be any concerns. If you have any concerns and you want to talk about it outside of this, either see me later tonight or just come by the office any day, and we'll feel free to talk about it, and you can look at it. So.
And on that note, we can certainly have you practice with it so you know what you're doing. And like anything, it's just going to have to become part of our routine here. But these are things that as we roll through conversations with parents and these input meetings, parents in our community expect certain things. They're going to expect that we're doing something on the school buses to keep their kids safe. And when we found these, like everything that's PPE or anything like that right now, they're hard to get. So these devices are, what were they, about $600 a piece?
800.
$800 a piece. And we bought 15 of them. So, I mean, that's the amount of money that COVID is impacting our school budget is staggering. I'm just going to tell you that.
And we did go with those because of price. The backpack sprayers are $1,550 each. They're double the cost.
Just on that note with COVID spending, I don't remember if I told you this or not, but the elementary schools, going back to this mask question, it's quite possible we won't require elementary, the really young kids, to wear masks in school because of all the different, it's just hard to have a kid not be tugging on it and probably not be real productive. So we've ordered desk shields. They're 3-sided, so they're going to be on every student. This is elementary now. Every student's desk, so they'll be, I think they're plexiglass, and that's, the building custodians are going to have to clean and disinfect, or the teachers, or even the kids. Everybody grab a wipe down your thing at the end of the day, or whatever it is they do. But 3,000 of those things. The purchase order that I just signed today. Anybody want to offer a guess for what 3,000 desk shields cost? No, not quite that bad, but it was close to $40,000. And that's just one solution to serve, that many kids. We've got the middle school to think about, the high school to think about. The custodians are going to be doing these in the classrooms, and the restrooms, and, after events and activities. I mean, like I said, we've got to be doing something, and people expect us to be doing something. So we're going to ask for drivers. We're going to ask your help. And I thought that was a good solution to have John do the morning stuff, and he's going to have to adjust his schedule a little bit, and then we'll ask each of you. And it took him 3 minutes, 4 minutes, whatever it is. And, we'll give you the wipes and whatever else you need. If some people, your tolerance level on your bus is going to be at different levels. And so the more you want to clean, I'm not going to stop you. If you want to do more stuff on your bus, great, have at it. We'll get you what you need. But I'm going to ask you to do the rails, do the doors, do this on the seats and the windows. And, beyond that, I guess we're just going to have to evolve and do what we think is right to try to keep everybody safe. So questions on that? Go ahead, Connie. Well, John's going to do before the route. So you won't need, John would do the before, in the afternoon you're talking? See, you're probably off the hook because your morning driver would have done it after the route. And I think the logic there is a little bit better to do it after the route. Now, if you and Kim alternate, I don't care. You two will have to work it out. But the placard idea was Tim's, red, green. It better be green before you get onto the bus. And because I don't want to have situations where you guys didn't communicate or whatever and it didn't get done and somebody gets sick and we didn't do what we said we're going to do. That's not going to be good. And I don't want you guys to be in a position where fingers are pointing or you're responsible for something. This is completely uncharted territory, but I think if we can develop a routine early, right away when school starts, and this is how we're going to do it, and different drivers, you may come up with better ways to do it, but we just got to be in communication, and I want you to work all that through Tim so that he can be working with John. And again, my focus with Tony is you can tell Tony these things, but Tony's strengths and where he needs, he's a mechanic by trade and a damn good one. I really want Tony working on the actual buses and doing those kinds of things. And that's why I brought Tim in, because Tim is coordinating. So coordinating communication, coordinating these kinds of efforts, and they're gonna work together with me, and we're kind of a three-headed, with Lori, a four-headed monster here, but I don't have a playbook that I can turn to page 4 and say, this is what we're gonna do. I wish I did. Well, and that's why we got 3 of them. We might just have to work it out to where we just all know, it's gonna have to be timing, of course. And, if Connie, if you'd rather do it in the afternoon, if that's the arrangement you guys make, I don't know. I mean, I understand, I respect that, you've got another job, and everybody's got places to go. We just have to make it work, somehow, some way, and we'll just have to figure it out, so.
Time on that, you come in the bus, you've got a red tag, okay, you spray that baby down, or are you shuffled to another bus? For how long time does that take for that to go
Well, are you talking dry time?
back in that bus?
Are you talking,
Time, from the time you spray it to the time it has killed all viruses is 10 minutes.
yeah.
Yeah. So if you figure, the average person anywhere from 3.5 to 5 minutes to do the bus, and then 10 minutes, so 15 minutes to spray it down and let it dry.
Yeah,
I mean,
which
if you
is-
come in and your bus isn't, disinfected and you don't have time, then, we'll have sub buses. We'll just move you to another bus quick that's ready and send you out on that.
knowing John like I think I do, he'll probably be here at about 4 o'clock in the morning, making sure everything's ready to go. I think he's gonna be really good and really thorough at doing this stuff. And we may have to make changes, we get into it, we may have to order more of these. I don't know. I mean, if you are out there right now shopping for PPE stuff, and you find an available option, you'd better not waste much time. You better get your order placed, because stuff is just like that, out of stock. You see it on the websites, and then boom, it's gone, it's out of stock. You probably could, but I think that's an awful lot of that.
Yeah, it's gonna be thicker, so it'll take a lot longer drying time, and it won't wrap items. It's static electricity is what it is. It's electrically charged water that's going out there and it's wrapping around. So it'll get underneath stuff, it'll get, all around a rail, as opposed to where a spray bottle just get the top, or what it touches, so. Battery operated, so there'll be a charger right next to it with the battery. We are going to test this next week. John is going to take one, he's gonna do all of the buses, and we're gonna see if the battery lasts. They say 4 hours, but if it doesn't, then we'll have to look at buying another battery to go with it. So.
I would venture to say these things, I don't know how long these things have been around, but there's a lot of new products popping up now, and a lot of things maybe getting manufactured really quick. There may be something better that comes out this fall. We may totally shift gears, or maybe we just made these work great. We looked at a lot of different things. This seemed to be the most logical approach, given the need of because think about the building custodian walking around, and you've got a lot of square footage you got to do. And, so we've got, like I said, 15, 16, whatever it was that we bought of those. We're kind of shooting in the dark here. I would not be at all surprised if we end up with another 16 about a week into the school year going, oh my God, these are great. We just need more of them. So entirely possible.
And that just happened yesterday or day before yesterday. John came out, he did a bus, realized it was getting heavy towards the end, did another bus, and it was real heavy, so right away I called Jason and said, if one guy's gonna do them all, this sprayer won't work. So we went to the backpack, but, like you said, it changes every day, and yeah, we may end up with more,
By about Christmas, John's right bicep is going to be just huge. He's going to be...
And even though every video you see, they have a lanyard attached to it, none of these came with a lanyard, and we don't know why, so we're going to see the guy next Tuesday. I think he's going to be here for some training and stuff, and I'm going to question him about those lanyards and why we didn't get them, but why they're in the video. But so they may or may not have a lanyard attached when the time comes.
So, there's that. Questions on that? Okay. Getting down to the end here. We've got one more agenda item, and I'm going to let Tim talk about this, but I'll give you a little bit of the backstory. We've mentioned in the past that driver licensing is there's more mandates coming, and it's going to become even harder to get a license or to maintain a license. And so in that vein, that was all delayed by 2 years, I believe, this spring when COVID started. But now in Tim coming into this role has been doing some research. And we have not been 100% compliant with some of the requirements about centralized registries of CDLs and drug testing, and then the collaborative reporting of those drug tests to other entities that track CDL. So there's like a common pool of database, of people and their random drug tests. So there's some decision making that goes into this. My goal with testing and making sure that we're compliant is, number one, we have to comply. But number two, I don't feel a need to over-test or overdo the random drug testing requirements beyond what we have to do. So we're going to go through, Tim will talk about the process. There's a registration that all the drivers will have to do to get into the registry database, and then they'll track and notify us when your number comes up for a random test. As you know, we pay for that, and you just have to go through the hoops and make sure it's all done. But there's some information sharing there that we weren't previously doing quite right. So we're going to get that corrected in this process as well. But I think where we landed on that was once a year testing on the, help me with the terminology
It's
here.
a query on the website to see if you had any positive drug tests elsewhere, because some people work for more than one employer driving. So you're going to have random tests at both. So it is going to be mandatory that we test at least, or query the database once a year.
Yeah, just looking for violations, and that's the right thing to do. And I mean, I don't have any concerns about any of our drivers here, but I suppose in bigger areas, you get some odd ducks that you have to kind of question that a lot more frequently. But we're going to comply, and we'll make sure that we play by the rules, but it's going to mean a little bit more effort from you guys, and we'll help get you set up and work through Tim to make sure that we get it all set the right way going forward. So that's really the last piece of this particular conversation. I'll let Tim go through that, and then I'll circle back around one more time for questions. But well, like anything, the government doesn't always do things the most efficiently. I don't know the history on what it was supposed to be, but I just know what it is now, and so we're going to have to make sure that we get from what we're doing to what it is now. And this actually sets the table then for that additional requirement on licensing, and it's part of one big registry. So the effort we do now is leading up to what's going to be required in 2 years. And I suspect what's coming down the pipeline beyond that is probably integration of driver training and some opportunities to, and I would welcome that, more cohesive opportunities to orientate drivers and get people help them get licensed, as well as maintaining the mandatory minimum hours every 5 years, because that's an absolute joke right now in South Dakota for bus drivers. There's just no tracking, and there's really no teeth to it, but yet you guys, schools, you have to do this. They just don't give us any guidance on how. So that'll be a welcome change. But Tim, let's go through that, and then we'll circle back and wrap it up.
I'll try to give you a little bit of background. When Vicki left, I was tasked with trying to figure out the drug program. Absolutely nobody knew what we were doing, so I had to call Sanford OCC, which is the one that does our testing. And she started going through lists. So what happened is, part of the MAP 21 initiative, which is the same as that driver thing, they changed the process. Previously, what would happen is, as an employer, we would get you randomly tested or suspectly, whatever the test would be. We would keep those records in our office of whether you had positive, negative, so on and so forth. Then previous employers, this is something we weren't doing, would send us a query saying, hey, this person's going to drive for us, used to drive for you in the last 3 years. Do you have any drug information on them? So new drivers, and some of the new drivers here have gotten that form, and we've already got a couple of them back, where we have to query your previous employer for 3 years whether or not you had any drug history. Well, the government's come back and said, we're gonna take that away from the local, which there's an example of why, because we didn't realize we were supposed to do things, and they're putting it in the clearinghouse. Now, the reason you gotta register for the clearinghouse, John, to answer your question, once you've registered, if I query the database, there's especially some circumstances where they're gonna contact you, they'll email you and say, you've been queried, can we release the information to that employer? Okay, you have the option to say no. At that point, I can no longer employ you. You're done. It's over. All right? So it's just a way of letting you know that somebody is checking on your background for any possible drug or alcohol use. That way you know what's going on. You don't have just somebody randomly out there getting access to the information. So that's why you have to register. Okay? So this document is how you do that. Go to this website. We need everybody to get registered as soon as you can. If you're having issues with it, come to the office, see me. We'll do it in the office. We'll work together, but we'll get you registered. In 2023, we will no longer keep any documents concerning drug and alcohol testing. It will all be at the national database. So at that point, new employees or reinstated employees, we will do a query. We actually have to pay for that. Leave that up to the feds, huh? We'll do a query. They'll tell us if there's any history that warrants us not hiring you, okay? Then once a year, we will do that same query on all drivers. That's the way if you were employed by anybody else and did a random test and were positive and we didn't know, we'll find that information out. That's the purpose of the clearinghouse and centralizing that information. So, you know, the sooner you can get registered with us, the better. The drivers that we have currently, I'm not going to query you this year. We will do it next year, but we need to get you registered so we know you're in the database, because that works hand in hand with Sanford OCC Med. They see who our drivers are, then they bring up our random list. Now, the other change to this is 50% of the drivers will be tested randomly per year. So that means your chances of getting tested just increased. So know that, and it'll be the same. You know, I'll call you in. You know, not like this last testing that we all went through, where we all had a week and a half notice. You'll be called in to come see me. I'll give you the form. You'll have 2 hours to go down to the clinic and produce a sample. So now, that being said, we will have to do a form that you're going to sign in August when you come back. It'll be a waiver, like anything else, saying that you grant us permission to query you on the database, okay? It'll be a limited one. It limits us to new hires and once per year, okay? So that way they know, you know, what we can or can't do. If you fail to sign the form, we cannot employ you. So, I mean, the feds have got it in there. They want you to have a part in it, but if you choose not to share that information with us, then we can't employ you. So that's something to keep in mind. So if you have any questions about it, see me either after this or you know, come by the office any day and we'll do that. So is there any questions about the drug clearinghouse? All right, so like I said, come see me if you need help getting signed up. So routes, driving.
Oh, yeah.
Starting next week, because I'm out this week. So.
Okay. So as school starts 5 weeks from today. I was just looking at my phone like, oh my gosh. I feel in some respects we're ahead of the game because, you know, we're getting together and talking about all these different things, but on a lot of different levels, I really feel like it's crunch time. So in that regard, you know, what's going to be happening in the next couple of weeks, parents, in theory, are going to be signing up, and Lori and Jennifer in my office will be starting to call and, you know, where are you at? Do you want to ride? Do you not want to ride? Clean up our routes, make sure everything gets set up properly for the new year. Get our cards made, get our wristbands, get all the things that we do at the beginning of a year ready to go. We'll get back together 4 weeks from today, August 17th at 5 o'clock right here. Okay, and we've already got the space reserved. And then we'll pass out the actual routes and, you know, your list and all that stuff now, or at that time. But what we would like for you to do between now and then is refresh yourself on your bus. You know, for those of you that are newer, if you need to refresh yourself on the operation of the bus, come do that. You know, grab a bus, take it out for a drive, do whatever you got to do to be comfortable. Refresh yourself on the use of the Synovia tablet system while you're doing that. Drive your route as planned. You know, Tim and Lori have them set up in the database as planned, we need your input. And again, this is something where we value how you want to do things. I really, truly do. But there's also, in the analysis of the route, there are some changes that we are doing a little bit different, and quite often there's some good logic behind that. So keep an open mind to drive it as planned, and then talk to Tim. If you've got a really good, compelling reason why you do it a certain way, I'm not so stubborn-headed that you can't have input. But I would really appreciate you talking that out with Tim to help us understand why you want to do it that way. Because then what we're doing in planning that, it's consistent, running even something as small as running it in the same order every day, and even if the kids aren't riding, allowing that time so that the times for the parents are consistent, that'll just alleviate a lot of questions and a lot of griping that I missed the bus. Well, they came 5 minutes early today, and we're running ahead because 3 kids before didn't ride, so they got here early and missed me. And then you have to turn around, and you all know how that goes. So I really want to strive for consistent timing as best we can, and allowing families to be able to plan for that accordingly. And we still have the app for Here Comes the Bus, and we'll turn that back on and allow families to use that when we get a little closer. Those are all valuable tools, but it doesn't replace your judgment, and if you think there's something, especially if it's safety related, I hate stops on the highway, and I think we've worked really hard over the years to get those out. We've also worked really hard on made stop arm violations a priority, and we've got those LED lights. Are they on all the route buses now? I can't remember if so you've all got an LED light in the back that's helping with that. And we bought 2 stop arm extenders this year. And we've got one installed on
Bus O.
So-
Actually, the video's in that folder too, if you wanted to play it.
Oh, you want to see that real quick? We can do that.
We did put an extended stop arm in Bus O, and if it comes out and hits something, it automatically retracts. And of course, James is a movie star.
James, you want to stand in front of that now?
So we'll see how it works. There will be, and Dave will get with you, we'll have a wrench on the bus and 2 of the Teflon bolts in there somewhere to store, just in case on route one of them breaks. But the company says they really only break when somebody hits the thing, so we'll see how that, yet to be seen.
Yeah, so in talking with Dr. Kindle, we bounce things off of him and say, hey, we'd really like to try this, and we're gonna, if this works like we think it can, I am not opposed to putting them on more buses and doing everything we can to stop people from running our stop arms. I mean, it's that important. So you guys all know that, and we're gonna make sure we dedicate resources where they need to be dedicated. So if you have a route that you're having a problem, it might not be right away. I don't have an infinite budget, but I do have enough resources that I think we've got to spare now.
Yeah. we've got
And
one more.
you can remove these and move them on buses, or is that kind of a big deal?
It's a big plane, but we can do it, so.
Okay.
We took pictures of all the wiring, just so Tony knows, so that if we have to put the old ones back on, we know where the wires go. But
Those are awesome. Yeah, where we had them all on. Only problem you might have with those is wind out in the country.
can force them closed again. Yeah.
And that thing would be ripping.
Yeah.
And I think there went. But they're easy to get on and off, because I pulled it on the ditch, got it up there, bolted it up.
Get your toolbox out.
The 2 new buses too will have backup cameras, and those will be DNR on the new propane buses. But we did go out and buy some backup cameras. We've put them in K and J. And they are actually, after talking to Larry Nichols, what they did, the fire trucks, the K and J, they're on all the time. You can reach up and shut it off, but as you're stopped on a roadway or whatever, no longer have to worry about a dusty back window or all of that. As long as your camera's clean, you can look up and you can see what's coming up behind you. So we're piloting that. We also have 2 others that we're going to try to put on 195 and 217, so they have backup cameras. So.
And while we're speaking of buses and updates and things, The propane buses should be delivered. I think there was a little delay in getting the cameras, but should have them any day or next week.
About 28th, 29th time.
So we'll have 2 brand new propane buses this year, and we're just finalizing a recommendation to secure the propane fuel itself, and it's looking like we've got a solution there. So I'll take that recommendation forward to the school board in August, and we'll be installing a tank, a 1,000-gallon tank on the site, and get you trained on how to fuel the bus and all that stuff. But right now, our plans are to move forward with implementing and continuing to build our fleet and transition from diesel to propane, provided the numbers work out and provided it's everything that we think it is going to be. But this is starting to really catch hold on the eastern part of South Dakota, and there's schools, Harrisburg, TE, Lennox, they're all in. They're all going propane, and we're going to be out in front with them on that and start making that migration. And those of you that are driving the propane buses this year, you're going to have nice warm tows come wintertime and nice warm bus, and hopefully it all works out. But I want your feedback. I mean, let's be talking about that, and the good, the bad, the ugly, whatever it is. If you have any of those experiences, I'd like to know. And then last item on bus updates, we're going to be working on the charters to potentially refurbish 195, and we just don't have $500,000 laying around to replace it outright. And there was a time where we were talking about eliminating charters, and I just don't see us doing that anytime soon because of the extra storage it provides us, for football and track equipment and all that stuff. So instead, we're going to see we've taken it down to, Dave took it down to Kansas City for us and made a friend at the shop down there. Apparently Dave was late. I don't know. Even though he was an hour and a half early, but he was late according to this guy. But so we're waiting for an assessment there and their take on what we can do to extend the life of that bus, and then we're having another company come next week.
8 o'clock tomorrow morning.
Or 8 tomorrow morning. I'm losing track of my weeks.
ABC will be here tomorrow morning at 8.
Yeah, and give us their assessment, and then hopefully between the two we have a little bit of an a la carte menu that says, hey, if you do this, 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 and this, you can probably expect another 5 to 7 years or 3 to 5 years or whatever it is, and assign a price to each, and then I can take that to Dr. Kendall and say, well, we can spend $500,000 and get a 10-year-old bus, and probably get 20 years of life out of it, or we can spend $100,000 and get 7 more years or whatever the numbers look like. And so I think that makes some good sense. And in that process, then I'm hopeful that we can wrap 195 and give it a little bit of a facelift too. So we might have another slick-looking bus rolling down the road here with the black to match the black. Maybe we'll have a red or something, or all white. I don't know yet. But so yeah, kind of some fun things, updates. And I don't like rolling into a track meet and having Yankton's buses look the oldest. That bothers me. I'm sure it bothers you too. So I like to look good, run fast. Helps the kids run faster, right? If they're riding a nice bus.
And that being said, James has been working all summer painting buses, getting rid of rust, patching holes. So you come in and see your bus, it's going to look pretty good. He's done a good job. So make sure you all pass on to him, big thanks for that, because he really worked hard on those buses. They look good. Tony did a lot of the painting in the initial, but then James had to take over, and he's been doing a lot. So
I'll drop my pickup off tomorrow. I got some.
I was going to say two other things that I would say on routing, just real quick, and then that's all I would have. Your afternoon routes have been changed. They will run the same as the morning route. So how you drive in the morning is how you drive in the afternoon. No more reversing routes unless we come up with a bona fide good reason why we need to do that. Simply because then we don't have subs trying to figure out 2 different ways to drive one bus route. It's just going to be the same. And then the other thing is, the high school is going to be using all entrances, which means kids are going to be parking back here, parents are going to be dropping back there if their kids are assigned to that entrance or to this entrance. So the high school bus drop will be on 19th Street out here at the SAC parking lot. You'll come in from the west side, come down 19th Street, stop right there just before the SAC parking lot, drop your high school kids, head on out to Summit and out. So we'll do that to start with this year, and we'll see how that works out. And who knows, might be something we decide to keep.
Not out back.
We won't go out back, because that's no longer just faculty, that's students and, yeah. So right out here, right next to the parking lot, going into the Summit Activity Center there. So
And that's really a good question for you, then, Dean. I don't know where you wait because it would be on the road. I guess you guys will have to kind of, you're talking about
The afternoon shouldn't be too big of a problem. I mean, parents will pick up, but hopefully they won't block for him to go to the back. So I'll get with Dr. Junkie on it. We'll figure out exactly what to do in the afternoon. Yep. You're on the roadway.
Yeah, and in talking about that, Tim picked up on that at our Thursday night public forum when Dr. Jonke was talking about, instead of having masses of kids using the same entrance, they're going to be assigned an entrance, and I don't know how many they're going to use, but I suspect having that many kids here, they're going to use as many as they can, and that means presumably there'll be kids parking back here, and I thought, ooh, that's a good point. We don't
Or
really
worse
want...
yet, parents dropping and blocking your bus. And so.
Well, yeah, what we're saying then is the drop would be just, we would do a fly-through here on 19th and just keep buzzing through and never...
The bus kids will start going in the Summit's activities entrance instead, so, yeah. I mean, because conceivably out here, we won't have parents stopping, holding up traffic, keeping us from moving. If we're back here and we got 5 parents taking their own sweet time by getting out of our way, I mean, 5 minutes sitting behind this school means we're late to everything else. So we looked at that, and so that's why we just decided to do it how you pull up, dump them, then move right on down to Summit and head on to the next school.
I wish when they designed this that there would be a pull-through back there and just out. I mean, that's obviously would have been a better, hindsight's 2020. I don't know what the original plan was. I wasn't. Anything else for the good of the group? I wanted to get out of here before 7. I think it's well before that, so bring questions to the 17th. I've got a couple of takeaways that I thought of that I know for a fact we didn't have an answer to, and one of those was, what will we do if a driver tests positive to COVID? I don't have an answer for you, but I'm hopeful that in the next several weeks, we're going to come up with some policy and making sure that we've got that question answered. I just don't know what it is today. I was going to show you the annual health screen. If you want to get this on your calendar as well, we're going to have a health screen, and it's going to look a lot like it has in years past. And I didn't know this at the time, but we actually kind of created a social distancing plan last year when we went to this appointment-based system. And years and years ago, we'd have everybody kind of show up at whatever time, and it was first come, first served. We had these masses of people, long waits. That wasn't good for anybody. So last year we went to, you had to sign up for a time slot, and we're going to do that same thing. So the health screen is going to run on August 19th and August 20th. And I'll have Jennifer send out a letter to all of you, our annual letter with, hey, telling you about the health screen and the web link to use to sign up. And so what it is, it's for those of you that didn't do it that way. I think last year we just had you contact Vicki. You can actually use a Google form, with the direct link, and type it in and go right to the thing and provide your information and choose what time works best for you. Like I set myself, just in testing it, I'm at 6:30 on the 19th, and then there's 5 time slots at 6:30. There's 5 time slots at 6:40. 5 time slots at 6:50, I think is how it was designed. And so we've got a capacity of 220 time slots. We average about 180 when we screen. So not every time slot is full, and that's okay. But it gives you some flexibility, and I'm going to ask you not to show up very much ahead of that time. There's no reason to, because you'll walk in, you'll be pre-registered, and all they're going to do is they're going to have all your stuff from this form filled out and printed and everything ready to go. So, oh, hi, Ken, walk on in, walk this way, and you're going to go right through the stations and right out the door. No, totally optional. And many of you may not use it because you had your physical. That's fine. Yep, no problem. This is completely optional if you want to do it. And we'll have, again, the form that if you have your driver physical, we're going to offer the incentive, the Bucks and Gazelles clothing incentive. Just do that alternate form, and I'll bring those to the 17th in-service. Fill that out or have your doctor sign off, yep, been physical, and you meet the criteria, that you've maintained at least 2 of the 5 screening criteria to be healthy range, and then you'll get this year it's going to be $150 or a $75 gift card to, I think we've got like 3 or 4 different places to go to those places, try to support everybody. So, you can pick if you want to go to JJ Benji, or you want to go to ESAW, or you want, whatever, Royal Sports. So that way we're giving everybody some business. And so Dr. Olson came up with that idea, and I said, yeah, let's try it. Why not? So they'll have, you can go in there and say, I like this type of shirt, and let's put I don't have one on today, but, something logo-wise, and make yourself some Buck and Gazelle. For those of you that don't already have a closet full of it, I've kind of run out of options eventually. I got a lot of red shirts, black shirts, gray shirts, starting to build a white collection now. So anyway, good news. We'll get that sent out to you, and we are going to be able to do that this year if you want to participate. Anything else? Otherwise, I'm going to turn you loose.
I'll
Okay.
leave the sprayer out for a little bit if anybody wanted to look at it.
Thank you all for coming. We'll see you here, and don't forget to come in and test drive your routes, and probably see you around, if not for sure on the 17th.